First speaker we have up now is Dr. Saudia Afrin. She recently completed her PhD from NC State University. Her PhD research work focused on chemical transport modeling and data analysis approaches to assess the air quality and health impacts from prescribed fire and wildfire smoke in the Southeast US. So with that, I hand over the ball to Sadia, Dr. Saudia Afrin.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here and for the nice introduction. So today, for today's talk, I'm going to present a part of my PhD research work where we investigated the air quality benefit and trade-offs of prescribed fire, considering a case study in North Carolina. Before starting the presentation, I just want to quickly thank my advisor, Dr. Fernando Garcia Menendez from NC State University, my advisor from US EPA, Dr. Kirk Baker and Shannon Kepledge, and also our collaborator from North Carolina State Parks, Thomas Crate and John Blanchard for their support. So as we all know that the prescribed fire is one of the most commonly practiced land management strategy in the Southeast, and it has also many other ecological benefits. And we also know that the fire suppression in this region has been proven unsustainable. However, one of the nuisance of these prescribed fires is the smoke coming from it. The smoke from this prescribed fire, along with the smoke of the wildfire, has been reported as the largest source of PM 2.5, which is called or known as the fine particulate matter emission in the United States. Although like the wildfire gets more attraction, but the prescribed fire corresponds to around 40% of this total PM 2.5 emission, which is the most concerning air pollutant in the year. And it has been found to be associated with all-cause mortality and morbidity and other respiratory diseases. Interestingly, these impacts of fires on US air quality is also increasing, while the other emission sources typically target of policy reductions are decreasing or have a declining trend. And if we see, or all of us familiar with that, most of these prescribed fire are occurring in the southeastern US, shown here with the green circles. And again, the other concern here for this region is the thousands or millions of people living in the wildland-urban interface, which is shown here as the brown colored region here. So all these conditions can create a severe air pollution, even if it is not checked properly. So in that motivation, in the initial part of my research, I tried to look at or categorize the air quality impact of prescribed fire smoke, because it's important because before to understand or a better understanding of the air quality benefit and a trade-off, the first step is to assess its air quality impact. So for that, initially I tried to look at if there is any prescribed burning signal on the ambient air quality of the Southwest. For that part of our research, we analyzed the burn permits of Georgia and Florida, and we found that there is a prescribed fire can explain up to 50% variability in ambient PM 2.5 concentrations, which is significant. For the Georgia specific case study, we also tried to look at that which are the communities being most exposed, and we also came up with the results that the burn intensive areas in Georgia had higher fractions of lower socioeconomic status people, and also the people with elderly and disabled status. Interestingly, we were also curious to see that who are the group of people those are burning. And we found that in Georgia, the government and non-industrial private landowners were the largest or the greatest smoke contributors on days with highest PM 2.5 exceedance days. So that was kind of the initial things that we had been doing. And we have some publications based on those our initial works on prescribed fires. Then later, we were further interested after identifying this kind of the air quality impact. Like people always have the questions that should we still burn, or how these impacts are comparable with the air quality benefit, because we should not forget about the air quality benefit of prescribed fires. It's substantially different from the other typical emission sources. It can reduce the risk of severe wildfires. It can also reduce the air pollution associated with these wildfires. However, if we look back to the literature, the degree to which prescribed fire may reduce the air quality impact of wildfire is very poorly understood and quantified. So with that attempt, we try to make a quantitative comparison between the air quality benefit and trade-off of prescribed fire smokes. However, it's a complex to compare wildfire and prescribed fire, mainly because these two types of fires are completely different in terms of their intent, extent, and also the nature. So we try to, that's why we try to come up with a new approach by considering a linked prescribed fire and wildfire scenario. The previous researcher mostly looked at the impact of the prescribed fire and wildfire by considering that how they could, prescribed fire could reduce the frequency, severity of emissions and fuel loadings, but we are not aware of any previous studies which have looked at the particularly the air quality impact at the exposure level. So for that case study, we considered the 2016 Western North Carolina wildfires. During that year and during the wildfire events during the month of November, it was reported that PM 2.5 level on 12 monitors was exceed the national ambient air quality standard of PM 2.5 due to those wildfire events. And it also transported at some point in the middle of the east part of the states too. In particular, for this case study, we considered two of these wildfires, and those are the Party Rock and Chestnut Knob wildfires. Party Rock fire initiated at the Chimney Rock State Park, and the Chestnut Knob fire initiated at the South Mountain State Parks. Both were initiated at the early November and ended and lasted till the end of the month. And the reasons that we choose these two fires, because those are the two wildfires that occurs, or those started within the state parks land. We had detailed burn area and their progression map from our collaborators. Then using these two fires, what we try to do that we try to compare a linked hypothetical and historical fire scenarios. Firstly, we assess the impact of these two specific wildfires. In my next slide, I will discuss in details how I have done or simulated or estimated their air quality impact. Then we try to simulate a second case, which we are referring as the case C, to assess the impact of prescribed fire treatment, just to assess that if we do prescribed fire treatment, what additional smoke we have to experience. Then we want to initiate a third scenario where we want to assess that what would have been the impact, or what would have been the impact of the post-treatment wildfire if that piece of land had been previously treated with the prescribed fire. And finally, comparing the pre and post-treatment wildfire scenarios, we can see that this is the reduced air pollution from prescribed fire treatment, which we are referring in this analysis as the air quality benefit of prescribed fire. It needs to mention that here by the term benefit, we are just only considering the air quality benefit in terms of reducing the PM 2.5 pollutions. We are not considering other benefits like the ecological benefits and the other benefits of prescribed fire for this comparison. Finally, comparing this benefit with the air quality impact of the prescribed fire treatment, or the prescribed fires needed to treat those lands, we try to make those comparisons and pull out some of the numbers. Now, if we see in details that how we have made those comparisons, firstly, we using the blue sky modeling pipeline, which uses the initial fuel loading of the perks and the burn area informations running through a chemical transport air quality model named CMAC. We simulate the specific impact of those two wildfires by specific impact. For example, here I'm showing the air quality impact. By air quality impact, we are here presenting the increase in daily PM 2.5 concentration by those two specific wildfires. A red color cells is showing that the darker PM concentrations. So it's clear that the PM is higher close to the fires. And we also compare these distributions with the satellite image, real-time image of those two fires. And if we see and compare these two plots, we said that our model simulation is pretty consistent with the actual satellite data. Then after having simulated our wildfires, in the next steps, we wanted to simulate the hypothetical prescribed fire scenario. For that, given that there was no historical prescribed fires at the Chimney Rock State Parks, we considered to choose hypothetical prescribed fires, and we consider simulating 14,500 acres fires at Chimney Rock and 13,500 acres fires at South Mountain State Parks to cover the entire burn area by those two wildfires. And again, using the blue sky and CMAC modeling framework, we estimated the air quality impact associated with all these 27 prescribed fires needed to treat the land associated with those two wildfires. Then here I'm just showing some of the results, like how my prescribed fire simulations looks like and how these PM are affecting due to this prescribed fire treatment on those 14 selected days. Here it needs to mention that I selected 14 suitable days based on their ventilation index and looking at the rainfall of that days, and just distributed and selected some of the days during the first 6 months of the year. And then for our third case, like in addition to the air quality information, we also simulated the fuel consumptions by those prescribed fire and reducing those fuel consumption from the initial fuel loading. We estimated the post-treatment wildfire scenario, assuming an equal burn area of the previous case to make a conservative estimate of our estimation. And finally, we got our pre and post-treatment wildfire scenarios, and also the air quality impact from our prescribed fire case. Now, from these slides, I will show some of the results. Here, since all of my fire events are occurring at different time intervals and different periods of the year, we compare their impact by aggregating their daily increase in PM concentrations and summing them and presenting them as an aggregated impact. In the left figure, I'm showing the impact of Party Rock and Chestnut Knob's fire-specific increase in 2.5 concentrations. And the right one is I'm showing the same, but for the post-treatment scenario. And this is my third case where I'm showing the aggregated impact of all 27 prescribed fires. And finally, comparing the pre and post-treatment wildfire scenario, I can say this is the avoided smoke impact due to our prescribed fire treatment, which we are referring here as prescribed fire benefit. And if we compare this benefit with the prescribed fire impact, from this case study, we can see that the aggregated air quality benefit of prescribed fires are much higher than their air quality impact. However, it needs to mention that these comparisons or this number would be changed depending on the in which day we would select to burn or under which weather conditions we would select to burn. In addition to looking at the aggregated impact, we were also curious to see that how those air quality impact varies by day. For that, in this figure, we are plotting the daily increase in PM 2.5 pollutions associated with those actual wildfires, which is shown here as the red markers. Here I'm showing the average increase within a 100-kilometer window. And the blue color bars are showing the increase associated with the post-treatment scenario. And if you see and compare their impact compared to the daily increase by those prescribed fires, those we distributed during the first 6 months of the year, we can see that the daily increase of prescribed fire is much smaller than the wildfires. Even the air quality benefit, which is the difference between the pre and post-treatment wildfire scenarios, that's also higher than the air quality impact when we consider the daily impact. Additionally, we also looked at the number of exposure in terms of exposure days. For example, in this figure, we are showing the number of days exposed under each of the scenario. For example, here I'm showing the days, or the locations where the underlying populations have to experience an increase in PM 2.5 concentrations greater than 0.5 microgram per meter cube only from this Party Rock and Chestnut Knob wildfires. Here, the red color cells is that those those are close to the fires have to experience fire smoke of that level for more than 10 days. Whereas the dark blue color cells are showing the locations, those are not affected even for a single days due to those wildfire smoke. And we did that for a group of, or for 3 different exposure levels. And we can see that the number of exposure days decreases with the increase of exposure levels. And this is also true if we see the distribution of exposure days associated with the post-treatment wildfire scenarios. And same also for the third scenario, which is the days in which now the underlying population have to experience prescribed fire smoke for additional days due to prescribed fire treatment. Like before, now if we compare between these 2 pre and post-treatment wildfire scenario, we can also estimate it the populations or the affected or the area, those will now have to experience a smoke, those now don't have to experience wildfire smoke of that certain level for at least 1 fewer days. And we found that wildfire smoke will not experience wildfire smoke for up to 4 fewer days. And if we compare that with the additional days of smoke exposure, we can see that the peoples living nearby of the prescribed fires now have to experience prescribed fire smoke for additional days, but of smaller concentrations. And if we move to the higher PM concentration levels, still the benefit is higher compared to the prescribed fire impact. Then looking at the exposure rates, we also try to look at like how the populations are being affected, just to bring the demographic factor into account. For that, we looked at the favored and affected populations. We are defining the favored populations as the populations living in this like the light blue color or red color regions. Those are now exposed to wildfire smoke for fewer days or at least 1 day. And in contrast, the affected populations are the populations exposed to prescribed fire smoke for more days or at least 1 day. Now, if we see the distributions of the populations here on those affected and favored cells, we can see here, this is the population distributions. We are saying these are the favored populations. Those are now have to experience smoke, but for fewer days. And here, if you see that the color gradient of the color changes based on the population density of that places. And this is the bottom panel is showing the distributions of the affected population. From this figure, again, we can see that due to prescribed fire treatment, only the peoples living close to the parks are affected, whereas peoples living far away from the parks are also benefited for having wildfire smoke for fewer days due to this prescribed fire treatment. Now, if we summarize these total populations into one graph, just to have a relative comparison of the numbers, here at the top of the figures, we are showing the favored population under these 3 exposure level we considered. And at the bottom of the line, we are showing the affected populations due to prescribed fire treatment. And here for each bird is showing the sum of the total populations under each of the category. For example, for a increased 1 microgram per meter cube exposure associated with wildfire smoke, now 9.6 million people don't have to experience wildfire smoke for at least 1 fewer days. Alternatively, we can say that 0.7 million people with experience prescribed fire smoke of that concentrations. And if we look at a higher PM concentrations, the prescribed fire affected population is very negligible. So that was kind of the things we have done associated with the air quality benefit and trade-off of prescribed fire smoke. So if we summarize these results, we can say that although the prescribed fires can affect air quality, their air quality benefit can be higher than their air pollution impacts. And it also depends on the days we will burn, or depending on the days where we are considering to burn those prescribed fires. And the populations benefiting from reduced wildfire pollution is also larger than the population affected by prescribed fire smoke from our case study. However, the only thing is that the neighboring communities have to experience prescribed fire smokes for additional days, but of lower concentrations due to this prescribed fire treatment. So that was what we did for this analysis, but we also need to mention some of the limitation of those analyses. Like we try to make a based approximation and a based representation of the model simulations of those 2 wildfires, but depending on the availability of resource and other constraints, we have to make some simplified assumptions to make the simulations happen. And also our analysis was only specific to those 2 wildfires. Those are the Chestnut Knob wildfires and the Party Rock wildfires. And situation might vary depending on where we are burning, on the location of the parks. And also there are other prescribed fire specific leverage, like the burn peak, that like we have to consider a equal burn area for the post-treatment wildfire scenario, where it's definitely expected to have a lower burn area for the post-treatment wildfire scenario, and also is expected to have a lower intensity. And also there are other facts like the feasibility of prescribed burn treatment on those considered parks. So with that, I like to conclude here just, but we have also want to mention here that we have some ongoing research on that, where we try to focus a smoke mitigations from a operational prescribed burning program of North Carolina State Parks. And for that later part of our analysis, our main motivation was that how we can maximize the use of these prescribed fires so that we can minimize the air pollution. At the same time, we can support this land management effort to maximize the amount of fuel reductions. And lastly, I like to thank my funding sources from National Science Foundation and Joint Fire Science Program. Thank you everyone for being here and watching the presentations. I would like to take any questions if you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sadia. That was really remarkable. I know it's giving me a lot to think about, and I've been typing with Laurel. We have a bunch of questions for you, even just from me and Laurel, but we are unfortunately out of time. So is it okay if we forward those questions to you and discuss it later?
Yeah, sure. No worries. Yeah.
Thank you so much.